Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Perfect. Let's give it a couple more minutes. Sana did inform me that she won't be able to join. She has a conflict. While we wait, I'll just paste the link to the meeting notes or the agenda doc. If anyone else has other topics of interest, please do add it. Okay, let's start. First of all, thank you everyone for joining. Just a recap of last meeting. So we did talk about the working group structure. I think we did invite more help from many of you. It's great that people have signed up and are starting to work on the working groups. One thing that I would request again as a reminder is, as a follow-up to the Dev Summit, I'm sure there were lots of interesting topics and action items for each of the working groups. So request again for the leads of each of the 5 working groups, I guess 4, if you keep aside working group 3, to update the documents that we had created last time. I looked through the documents a few hours ago. I saw all of them were empty. I'm sure there are lots of topics that would be worth to document and follow up on. So that's a reminder. A few topics that I found on the that were requested and or would be useful to track. One, I think Syed, I don't know if he's on the call, but he had requested a presentation for 15 minutes or so on the northbound interfaces for OSS, and this was a follow up to the Elephant DTF presentation that was created. So that was one, and then I would request each of the working groups to provide their inputs in terms of where they are in terms of the meeting schedules and anything that they would like to surface to SIG1 as a follow-up. So those are the 2 high-level topics. If there are other topics, please do add it to the talk. And with that, I don't know, Syed, are you around?
I'm here, Kaushik, yes.
Perfect. You want
Can
to
you hear
take
me?
over and yeah, we can hear you. Do you want to take over and spend about 10-15 minutes on your content?
Sure.
I'm going to stop presenting.
Okay, I'll share my screen. Please let me know once it is visible.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So thanks for giving us this 15-minute slot. So this proposal was presented during the Elephant DTF forum in June, and so now we have gone through and taken the next steps to work on the implementation. So implementation is still in its initial stages, but we wanted to come here and just talk about it briefly again and seek feedback on it so that we can just align with the next steps and see if we are going in the right direction. So I'll just give a brief overview, a recap of the solution. So this was the northbound API. So we wanted to propose a northbound API to be exposed on Nefio for OSS integration. And this was what was earlier explained. I will just set the context again for the same thing. Not sure if the same audience were there in that call or here. So Nephew, the target scope, the way we understand is from the concept of how network service topology and the network function management. So it aligns to this highlighted scope in the Mano architecture. And for this proposed solution, we are mainly talking about the interface with the external world in the OSS basis area. So the point of integration is the OSMA NFVO interface. That is where we are trying to explore the possibility of exposing some option for outside interfaces such as ONAP or other orchestrators to be able to send input to Nefio and then for it to be used further down. So here, these are the Sol5 APIs, some of which are being used or relevant to the scenarios where the network service management, the VNF package management are more relevant ones, and then some which are like or not so common or the priority to operations which are yet to be exposed or used. Then from the Nefio, the onboarding of what Nefio supports or a functionality exposed, what we understand is the network functions packages, the package management, and the life cycle of the packages, which is driven through Porch. So here we are trying to we see an opportunity for the network service lifecycle management where the NF topology was introduced in R1 and which is seen or which I would see as a first step towards the same. So we are trying to explore that and then see how we can introduce in industry specifically the TM in the TM forum language, one of the open APIs that TM forum exposes. We are trying to leverage that to expose one of the TM forum APIs for the OSS world to talk to Nephew. So I won't go through all the slides. If we want, then we can maybe discuss them. So here, this slide where we see the alignment of the functionality that is that Nephew proposes or stands for. Please stop me or correct me if there's anything that anyone wants to highlight or add to. So here, with the in this overall structure, the NFVO functionality maps to the NFVO functionality maps to the NFVO and VNFM for this management which happens, and on top of it, we are saying that we can expose an adapter which can then send the NF topology or the input in the form of the CRD, which can be then taken after that. An FEO can come spring into action and then perform the operation or use that CRD, the data coming in the CRD, and use that for further NF deployments. So any service orchestrator which can send the information down, so it could be either in HC Sol5 APIs or TMF 664 APIs. So we in this proposal, we have concluded to use the TMF 664 APIs for the same. And this NBI adapter's functionality is that it will take the input in the form of a JSON, which is TMF664 format, and it will translate that into CRD, which can then be consumed by Nefio. So that is the high level principle that we would want to align to. In the adapter, there will be the logic which will identify the information coming from any system in the form of a 664 package. It will then read that and then translate that into a CRD. So 664, when we spoke about it earlier, that what 664 is, it's a TMF, the TM forum body, which is it provides industry standards for telco world for different enterprises or different telcos to leverage those standards. So amongst this, there is this open API standards which TM forum gives different APIs for different scenarios, like the product order or service catalog, service inventory. Similarly, resource function API is TMF664, which is for activation and configuration of resource functions. And resource function by itself was the concept introduced by TM Forum, this technical resource document 2055, which explains what a resource function is. So resource function is basically any atomic entity which can be used to arrive at a network service, and by combining multiple atomic functions and then using them to arrive at a meaningful service, that is a function or a service that is required. That is the job of a resource function. So I'll just show this here. Yeah, so this is the extract of the TR255 document, which shows, so if you see the boxes here, they show the connectivity between different functions and then arriving at a single function which is used to display or perform a specific capability. So lowest level is the atomic network resource function, and then there could be multiple resource functions combined, which is a composite network function, which combined together provide a function which can be utilized. So that is the basic uh, principle behind the resource function and what was proposed in TR255. And then the TM Forum 664 API is the realization of this resource functions activation. So let me just quickly go to the other document for TR664, which gives us a use case of how this is realized. So, and then I will come to my slides. So here is one of the use case of realizing a functionality in the form of these resource functions.
Sorry to interrupt you. I guess we are still seeing the slide. At least I'm seeing only the slide. Everybody's seeing document or?
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, just
Yeah,
the
I was
slides.
sharing.
Slide. And by the way, Syed, a couple of hands are up. If you're ready for questions as well.
Yeah, sure. I was not able to see.
Kaushik is first, and then followed by Baying. Please go ahead, Kaushik.
Yeah, so Sayed, thank you. This is a very relevant topic. I know you talked about the NFV Mano architecture. The one question that I had was when I look at Solfi as NST management service, right? But we can also decouple the NST, the representation itself, from the Solfi interface. Have you looked at that? Like, because I saw you talked about NF topology CR, right? Do we need to have an NF topology CR as an independent thing? I know that is how we have done it today in R1, but then technically, like this is a key topic for architecture working group 1, which is in terms of brownfield integration, right, with especially the northbound systems, would we not consume NST as is, but then think about, hey, maybe there's a different representation to Sol 5 as an example, right? How have you evaluated those and contrasted those with TMF 664?
So we had done this comparison. There is table here at the back. I skipped that slide. Okay, that's done this. Okay, so let me share separately. So what we had done, the reason why we went to 664 was mainly the Sol 5 capability. What it exposes was the way we are able to come up with a deployment structure is using something that is defined at design time in the form of Tosca, whereas 664 gives us the flexibility to be able to do it at runtime. So otherwise, more or less, they were similar details available with both. So that was mainly the driver behind our reasoning to go with TMF 664 instead of Sol 5. Does that help or?
Yeah, maybe my question wasn't clear. I understand your reasoning. Have you evaluated a mixed mode where you take NSD and then try to build a more declarative like interface, right? For example, if Sol 5 is not the right choice, but would something like NSD itself be applicable? Like maybe I don't understand TMF 664 enough to understand what the contrast with NSD is.
So we and the adapter that we are building, that could be any specific CRD that we would want to create. So it is not that currently the implementation is done to translate the 664 into a CRD which is NF topology. But the CRD, what we are aiming at is to come up with a base the standard class for CRD, which is defined considering different CRD implement or some CRD examples that are now put in R2 for different entities like UPF, AMF. So initially the CRD which was available, we considered that. And now with the information which Nefio is producing or the community is producing for CRDs, we are looking at that to arrive at the standard CRD class and aim that to be the output that will come. So it will not be necessarily tied to always NF topology, but a standard CRD structure that will be created out of a 664 format. But yes, the input that we have considered is 664 and not the Sol 5 input.
Yeah, maybe Kaushik, maybe I can try to add to it. Let me try to say, see if I can probably answer your question, right? Just see if you look at, I think Sol, right? Standards. I think the way they were doing the design time is being done through Sol 1 and Sol 4, right? Or Sol 7 in case of NSD, right? That's what. So you define your Tosca structure, right? Using Sol 7 or Sol 1 combination, and then when you want to instantiate, then you Sol 5 comes into picture, right? So there were two distinct ways the way it happens in Mano architecture. But here, what we wanted to do was we wanted to have a single API which performs the operation as well as has the capability to be able to define the resource model, that how your different components of a resource functions are related to each other. So that's why we went for 664, not it's Sol 5, because if I only use Sol 5, you only indicate I want to instantiate or I want to do some operation of creation or instantiate or scale of a network service. But I would not be able to indicate the internal representation of the network service, which all network function it is composed of. Because that representation comes from Sol 1. That is a more of a Tosca model which you have onboarded early on.
I see. No, I understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaushik.
Yeah.
So there were more questions. If we can maybe go further on.
Yeah,
there's one more.
Buying is there next year.
Actually, team was there first. So I like the, team. Yeah, right hand. Team.
Just to be careful, guys, because when you do this, we have to we have to realize that at least for ORAN integration, right, for the ORAN side, there's a separation of concerns, right? We have a function that resides in the cloud that does the deployment similar to the VNFM, and then we have an SMO, an orchestration function that's centralized across the different clouds, and that's the NFVO function. So when you're talking about putting a TM forum interface, it's northbound of the NFVO, but there will have to make sure we're in concert with these other interfaces as well, such as the ORAN northbound of the DMS, which uses a Kubernetes API and a set of CRs. Am I somewhat making myself clear?
Yeah, so we were talking about, if you can maybe correct me what I have understood here. So when I spoke about this interface, we are considering the OS MANFO interface. Are you talking about further than that? We have to consider where else NFO interacts with the outside world?
Yeah, so I mean, what you're doing here is you're taking an ETSI NFV logical interface architecture, right? And so I was just trying to apply it towards that architectural structure you have. Again, in ORAN, in the Open RAN, the specifications, there's a differentiation between the NFVO, which they call the NFO functions, that go across multiple clouds, and then there's the differentiation between the VNFM. The closest that you have is you can call the VNFM, is something that resides on the cloud, and we're going to, as part of the ORAN integration, provide an interface and a set of CRDs that can act on that NFVO to VNFM interface that you're talking about. If you're saying on top of that, I want to also have another function, point is make sure we have these building blocks in place. If you want to have another function that actually performs the entire orchestration, oddly enough, that needs to handle multiple cloud instances, called an NFVO, that and have a TM forum interface on top of that, I mean, that could certainly be discussed. My point is we have to be careful that we don't, glob all this back together to be, one monolithic set of functions.
Yeah, so but we are not proposing any orchestration here in the adapter. So orchestration would still be the job of NFVO to manage. So the adapter is only performing the translation of the input that it receives into a CRD format.
Yeah, but something's got to accept that CR. So that means someone's got to develop an NFVO. You got to act on the CR, guys. A CR is just, it's basically a representation, right? So.
Yeah, so we took the principle from the way I have seen some of the tutorials which have been done, where when we try to see how a deployment for a different network functions is done on NFVO, we start with onboarding the CRs. So that onboarding of the CR from NBI adapter into NFVO, that also has to be done. So we have to, and that is something that we will have to add in the adapter, that it once the CR is received, once the input is received by adapter, it creates the CR, and then it also performs a function of onboarding that CR onto NFVO. So that much is the job which will be performed by NFVO, by the adapter. And then once it is onboarded, like we have seen for the package, the tutorials where we onboard a package on NFVO, then that information, once it is fed into NFVO, it will be utilized to create the specific whatever is the deployment structure or whatever is being called out as the input in that payload.
Let me ask from team's question perspective. So if you reflect this typical network orchestration stack, NFVO and the VNF manager, in typically NFVO, they have the substructure of the old VNF underneath, which is NSD. And the NFVO, they determine the connection between the VNF, and now we have CNF. So they control that. Also, they have a ability to which the cluster, they're gonna deploy the CNF or VNF. There's all kind of there's management on top of the VNFM, because VNFM only handle particular VNF, but network service NFU, they see more of the broader the view. But now you're moving into NFUs, and I'm glad to you not considering Soldier 05. I was worried about, because Soldier 05 has in principle they're using Soldier 01 structure, which is NSD. They have a lot of artifacts, which conflict with the Kubernetes resource, the artifact. That's why some case, for example, in traditional NFO, they taking the Soldier 01 based on the older artifact and all the fine knob and tune. And then when they try to talk into Kubernetes, and they have to translate into map into Kubernetes resource. For example, in order with the same problem, we define everything in the Soldier 01 and then passing through Soldier 05 or the API. The problem is whatever we define in Soldier 01, and there is the corresponding configuration in the KRLM, for example, Helm chart or some other KRLM. So that's why you have to configure both places. So it's very confusing and then error prone. That's why we try to delegate all the configuration to the cloud native, the artifact the configuration, such as Helm chart. And now we're talking about Nephew, the native way. That means the SMO part, they should very simplified, because they delegate all the configuration to the code. So I like that part, but stay confusing your no-span API. So you have to, team said you have to send the API CR, the nephew or somebody else, they have to manage the NFU function used to be, they have to handle those capabilities. They have to able the connection between the CNF resource, network-wise and the traffic-wise. They have to configure everything like that. Used to do done by NFU, but now if you put that function into Nephew, and Nephew is not just handling the CNF manager and just handling also the NFU functionalities. That's why when you send the request toward the Nephew through the NoSpan API, you say it's going to be a very thin layer, but they need to know how to understand how to manage that. So you have to mimicking all the traditional functionality through the Nephew. There's some little concern about the NoSpan API and then interfaces, and then how they map into Nephew CRD structure, and then operator in the Nephew in later on. The operator has to do work on that, actually configuring connection between CNFM and any resources, right? So that's why I took the team's input. Yeah, I think that I value his concern, and then also I have my own concern here. Yeah, that's my input.
Sure. So yeah, thanks for that. That's where we are thinking to seek feedback on how we take forward. So if you see, I have moved forward to the example that we had considered, so of what the information that will be available in the payload. So we had created this free 5GC sample, which are only UPF and SMF interfaces. And so this connectivity, which we are saying that we would want NFO combination, NFO functionality also to be performed by NFO. That was our understanding that it does that. So because once a CRD is received, then using that information from the CRD, NFO uses that information to onboard a network function like a UPF or an SMF. So here, if we see these connections between these two SMF and UPF, we have the two interfaces. One interface between N4 and SMF, N4 and UPF, N3 and UPF, and then N3 to the external world. So external interface. That is what is created in the form of the resource functions in TMF 664. And the same thing we are going to translate into how a CRD is expected to be and to be submitted to an FO. So if we see there is certain gap, then please let us know. So here, like this previous screen which was showing this connectivity, this is the one which we are going to realize in resource function TMF664 format, the JSON which comes down. And then if I show the payload here, this is the outcome CRD. So this was the one which was created during R1. So this is the output which will get created from that. So if you just so this is the JSON, which is the 664 JSON, which contains the different interface that which depicts the connectivities between different resource functions. So all of those entities are created as resource functions, and it shows addition of all of those resource functions here. And then all of these, there is this connectivity which builds the connection between each of these interfaces, which was shown on that diagram. And then this creates gets translated into the corresponding CRD which Nefio uses, which will already have the information of the corresponding entities that are needed, plus the where they should get deployed, like the NF attachment information, etc. So with that information being sent in the CRD, will that be useful to be used? And that is how I saw it is sent for the current CRDs when they are onboarded. Or is there some other thing that we are missing that needs to be considered here?
Quickly, I think the TM664, I think you try to handle both the NSD and then CNF, the D capability through the Kubernetes native resource configuration. I think if we do, then the connection between NFU and then VNFM is kind of mushed. I think more flexible. But I'm kind of concerned about the Soldier 05 and Soldier 03, but you are considering TM664. Looks like it's more flexible, but we'll see. But much better than so far to me. Okay. Yeah.
CRD connection, the here, all this CRD which will finally get created. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Hey, Syed, we can hear you, but just one thing, logistically, we have about 25 minutes or so. There are a couple more hands. Can we take these as action items and follow up in the next SIG1 meeting? I would like to spend some time on some of the working group updates and logistics, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So I do not have anything else. So I was mainly, we wanted to seek feedback on this, so we can take that as actions and then come back. So
could you do me a favor? Just I'm sorry, just want to make sure that you get hooked into the right person, but could you make sure you pass this by Seishu? For the certainly, so I can align it with the ORAN integration.
Sure.
Kumar.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll consult Shizu on this. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, man.
Yeah,
that would be nice because Seshu, I, and then team, we are working in this area too. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'll stop sharing. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and I've linked these. So there was one elephant DTF slide deck that I linked in the meeting notes, and I know you linked it on the SIG1 Slack channel as well. Was this presentation the other presentation, or is it the same, or is it a different one?
It's the same one. I just reduced some of the slides for lesser time.
Okay. Let's maybe follow up offline with I guess Seishu is the person for ORAN, and then generally for the group the slides are linked. I know somebody also pasted it on this Zoom channel as well. So please review those offline. Please provide your inputs or questions, and let's come up with more specific areas for this topic to be discussed in the next SIG1. Ravi?
Oh yeah, thanks. So I mean, when I looked at the architecture, I felt it felt logically kind of it felt conformant with Nefio, what Nefio's objective was, like basically to offer where the I think that the network function the network function topology CR itself did not have specific requirements when it was created. I mean, as far as I know. because there was no kind of an assumption of who's going to consume it. But the way you presented it, it seems to be a logical way a service orchestrator would consume it, in the sense that, okay, saying that, okay, I have this, I need to create this instance, this set of network functions, and and probably there's an indication of network functions to a particular set of clusters that you want to deploy it in, and the whole hydration pipeline is handled by Nepio in terms of using the meta CRs for network function deployment, and then coming down to the level of the deployment artifacts and so on. So I think and I'm not very conversant with the TM forum and the HC Sol APIs, but I think what would be good, I think you have somehow probably had one of the slides where you're kind of showing the relationship between network function topology and the resource function, that kind of breakdown and so on. So I think it will be good to say that, to basically compare the network topology, network function topology CR spec the way it is, which is, I think, it's a very bare bone structure right now, to if somebody like, if the service orchestrator was the way you are seeing it from a Sol and TM forum perspective, consuming it, what would be the additional set of requirements on this network function? Then at least you would have at least one network function topology CR that is consumable, or that can be applied in an end-to-end scenario from an FEO perspective. I think that picture, if you can clear that will be good. I think that's where your slides are heading towards. But I felt it was pretty in line with what Nephew was trying to do. I was just trying to, I could not fully capture what Byung and Kim's concerns were, but yeah, it seems to be, aligned with at least what the network function topology was trying to, was created in the first place. So, yeah, thanks.
Sure, thanks, Ravi. So yeah, we will connect with Seshu and then also see his feedback on the same. And I would request, so I will go through the chat and try to answer here. Plus on the Slack channel also, if people can give feedback on the slides, I would appreciate that. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Syed, for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so coming back to the agenda. So last time we talked about working groups in terms of, sorry, that's the wrong button. Last time we talked about the working groups and, having the rigor of talking about, the updates from each of the working groups. So I am requesting each of the working group primary leads to provide their updates. There is working group 3, which is more of planning for the releases, which for now we'll keep it aside. But rest of the working groups, if you could quickly provide where you are in terms of maybe even basics, right? Like, when are you meeting? Are you meeting on a regular cadence every week and so forth? And then quickly talk about what are your focus areas and anything for the SIG1 group to keep in mind. And if it helps, I'm just quickly looking at the key owners or contributors. So I see Sana and Bernard for working group 1. I see Sana is missing. I don't know if Bernard, are you here? I guess not. Anyone else who has been participating in the working group 1? Eric or Alexi or anyone else?
Is there anything like working group 1 separately, Kaushik? I thought this is working group 1.
I thought we last time discussed about this, and the thought was we will still have a smaller working group 1 and then bring it here. Was that not the consensus?
Yeah, I think Sana was recruiting members into that group in the last call.
Right.
Kaushik, and that's the update. Basically, he wants to get members of the community to volunteer. And actually, I think she was creating a document where she added some of us showed interest, and then it's reflected there. So
Yeah,
it
so
is, I would say at this point of time, the update is, like there is a forum, rather quorum formed for the working group 1. That's an update at this point of time, and probably we'll discuss more about that.
right. So this is the list that we had talked about last time, but it looks like there has not been any active meetings or and hence no updates to share,
That's
right?
true. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I think this was the one that was discussed last time to get
Correct.
I think
Correct.
for me, the working group 1 was, yes, this meeting today, but yes, you're right. I don't think there is dedicated meeting for this specific subgroup, as far as I
Understood,
know.
Eric. Yeah. So I'll reach out to Sana. Maybe given she's also on this working group, she can help schedule the meetings and kind of help co-own it with Bernard. Then working group 2, I guess
Yeah.
Alexi, Tim.
So yeah, we actually are meeting every Wednesday now at 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. PT, right? So you can correct that. I guess LNF might have had a problem with Fridays, so we moved to Wednesdays. We did have a meeting last week that we started talking about this, and so we're in the process of actually creating a logical architecture so we can determine certainly for 2024 uh, what are the things that we want to show. There are three aspects of this, of course. There's what do we want to do with the SMO, the RAN management domain? What do we want to do with the network functions themselves? And then we have some functionality that is a part of what the ORAN would consider to be the O cloud for both doing infrastructure management as well as services, management of the deployment services. So we're looking at that, and we're trying to set up work items for 2024 that go along those three lines. And so it's basically very very initial. I actually have a presentation that we'll be able to have further discussion with that on Wednesday.
Okay. And do you have a timeline where you would like to bring these specific architectural discussions to SIG1?
Yeah. So once we as a group kind of decide on what we said was as we decide on that high level architecture and then decide on what the objectives would be, right? I want to see, what do we want to see, right? Those types of things, we'd come back and get validation from what I guess it's not SIG1 anymore, but from network architecture. So I
Okay.
would suspect it's, it goes as quickly as they do, but I would assume that'll be sometime next month.
Understood. Perfect. Thank you for that update. Yeah, just keep updating the agenda as and when you're ready for the broader discussions.
So let me understand this. So you want us to, as we're bringing topics to you, to update the agenda for when we're ready to discuss those topics. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yeah, I think generally
Okay.
for each of the working groups, if all of the leads or whoever in the working groups can add those topics to the SIG1 agenda meeting as and when the working groups are ready to discuss, that'll be great. We will, in general, have a week or we'll have an update section for each of the working groups as part of the daily or the regular cadence for SIG1. But beyond that, any specific discussion topics, please add to the agenda so that we can slot you.
And when we do that, should we also then just put a notification out onto the SIG network and in Slack as well, just to let them know that we've added it?
Yeah, I think that would really help. Or you can tag it on the document, like you can tag Sana and me or whoever the chairs are in this case, uh, and say, hey, I've added this topic. Please help slot it.
Yeah, I was more worried about making sure others
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
the,
no, yeah.
and the community kind of knew that what we were doing so that they would be, somewhat at least can prepare if they want.
Yeah, no, I think in that way, yeah, Slack would work better. Yes. Okay, thank you. Moving to working group 4. So on that topic, there was also the discussion on SIG1 Slack channel about, hey, where does modeling belong? and should UX and modeling really be coupled? So I saw the inputs from bunch of you, Varadarajan and then Bernard and few others. Do people are people aligned, or is there still confusion in terms of where modeling should belong, and what should be the scope of working group for? We did discuss some of it in the past. I have my thoughts, but I would really like to open it up and see where people's minds are.
Sandeep, want to take it or? Okay, my thing would be initially it was started with UX experience and tools. Modeling is also a very important topic, but for me it looks like working with one, because there requires RAM modeling from working group 2. There requires many inputs. So it's a typical architecture, design, modeling should be in the working group 1. Just a thought process, nothing else. Yeah, and it will be too much for one working group to take all of that. UX experience, tools, and adding model. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is, by the way, exactly my thought, that modeling is a very generic and broad stroke. It would be better if working group 1 were to lay the groundwork in terms of what areas of modeling are important, and then if there is intersection with other working groups, they can own those or carry those forward, right? But generally, as a larger ownership, I feel it belongs more to the architecture working group. That's my thinking, which it looks like it's aligned with you. But I would be curious to hear if there are other alternate thoughts.
Go ahead, Vance.
Well, I'll just, given the invitation, I'll just quickly interject that as a information modeling practitioner, I find the subject quite important, and I find it very curious to conflate it with the UI stuff. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you, Vance. I think maybe these groups are not well thought through, working groups. I don't think there should be a conflation. You're right.
Yeah, so it's when so the problem that we have is today in SIG 1, I don't believe a lot of modeling has been done, right? So the question, the thing that we first have to define, what do we mean? Because if we are expecting modeling to be done in SIG 1, there's a lot of detail. If you go to the nitty-gritty detail, and the question is whether the SIG 1 is up for the task or not. That's
a good question, Lynn.
my take on it. I have no problem how we do it. What I see is that if today it's happening in SIG 2 mainly, and the reason is because of the details, right? So that's my only concern that I see here. But I do agree that it should not although it's related to user experience to a certain extent, because you typically define your APIs the way people want to consume you. So there is a level of UI there. But yeah, that's my main concern, is the level of expertise and details SIG 1 today goes into versus what we are expecting.
I think that's all very relevant. So maybe I'll update on this. We had exactly 2 conversations, myself and Bernard, on the topic. The first was recognizing that we would need to centralize the conversation from SIG 1's perspective. And 2, that what we would start with is gathering what SIG 2 has done in one place and documenting it. But it's clear that it needs participation between the 2 SIGs, right? So the idea is not to supplant the work happening in SIG 2, but rather to track it, document it, and include inputs from all the rest of these integrations that we're talking about here, right? So if it's connecting to TM Forum, connecting to SOL 005, if it's connecting to ORAN, we want a place where we can put all these requirements together from the other work groups and just centralize the discussion. So the idea is not to dictate to at least as I understand it, not to dictate to SIG2 what the model should be, but rather to track the work and allow inputs to come from SIG1. If that makes sense, Wim. So it's a work in progress. We don't quite know how to do it yet. Our first task is to just document what we have and maybe put it in a few diagrams that are more easy to digest for the rest of SIG1.
If I may respond to Bala quickly. So
sure,
I think in release 1, we did that to a certain extent, right? I mean, we basically created a document. I don't think it's fully modeling, as I think Vince would, Vince, sorry for the wrong name, would describe it. But we did do some discussion with SIG1. So don't get me wrong, right? The topic is very important and it has to happen. What I do see is that today the level of details in SIG1 is not there. And I mean, we have to agree on a working principle that allows us to move forward, basically. And that's my main comment. But
yeah, I would answer that. You're right that SIG1 is not there, but it should be there. At least my understanding is that we really need to up the level of detail from SIG1. We've been very vague, in my opinion, with our user stories, with our architectures, very, very high level diagrams. But look at the list of topics we have on working groups right now. We're starting to get very detailed, right? If we want to talk about ORAN integration, we can't do hand waving. We need to start to really get into the depth of the details of what ORAN is exactly proposing. What is Team Forum exactly proposing? So yeah. So
here is
think
my proposal, Tal. Right? If we want to get into that direction, I would say, I believe in January we should have the spec for R3, right? So let's SIG1. If SIG1 wants to go to the full-blown modeling, we have till January to actually come up with that specification for R3. So I would say, based on that, let's see what comes out, right?
Yeah, I'm not even looking forward to. I'm looking forward at this point just to begin the work and have something. There's no goals yet, exactly. Not for any, definitely not milestones. So we're just starting this. It's really just Bernard and myself. And if anybody would like to help and participate, we would very much welcome it.
Maybe
no,
this
I have
will,
to, but we have
Yeah.
to be clear. So my point is this: if we want to go down this path, a release will require a modeling from the beginning, right? So typically a release depends on an API spec at the end of the day, right? If it's unclear, we will waste a lot of time figuring that out. And so, but I think what I'm trying to say is I'm setting the expectation from my perspective of what is expected if we want to go down this path. I'm not saying that we have to do that, but that's my only comment.
Right. Bala is waiting, but before that, maybe why not join with Bernard and kick off the working group 1 meet? It is essential. Everybody here agrees. We'll join. You're right. Information modeling or data modeling, YANG modeling, it is required. Now, working group 1 is actually not happening, right? So anyway, Bernard is there. You join, and when everybody can define.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm still confused what work group 1 is exactly.
Well, yeah. One thing is do you have any disturbances from my side? I just want to make sure there's some noise in the background. Is it okay?
No, you can go. Bala.
Okay, cool. So I think from the UX perspective, Kaushik, it's kind of good to enumerate what are we actually looking for. And slightly tangential, talking to the other one, the UX. It's not only about the UI, because we have very minimal UI, and probably obviously we'll get some professional UI going forward. But we're also looking about the developer experience. We are looking at the operator experience. So we are talking about the SDKs. We are talking about the tools that we are not only from the operational perspective tools, but also from the developer perspective. So I think those things, if you look at it, they are a big group in itself. So probably having a UX and enumerating those, what exactly we're looking for, may make sense and may solve some of the confusion. from the modeling perspective, which is a big thing by itself, I agree with almost everyone here. Probably combining that with UX doesn't make sense because both of them are big topics by themselves. And I agree with Wim. Today, the modeling, because of the details that is needed, I mean, we look at what we done from R1 to R2. The moment we introduced a new vendor, and then how we refactored, and and also when we introduced RAN itself, in addition to the core workloads. So the amount of data that is and information and the depth that is required. So it's absolutely fine. I'm not gonna say which group that it needs to come from, but there needs to be a lot of details from a lot of domain experts to create a model. So that's the one thing that we need to recognize. Thank you. That's the so 2 points. Let's clarify what the UX working group is with the enumeration of what exactly we are looking for. It's a UI experience, developer experience, operator experience. Then probably I think we are all converging that modeling could be part of WG1. Thank you.
Yeah, the Bala, you summed it well. That was what I was going to recap, right? So one, yes, we need to define. Some of us will take the, take the ownership of defining what does UX mean for SIG1, the areas rather, not necessarily the priorities, but at least the areas, and the owners of that working group. Which working group should be owning user experience within SIG1? What's the relationship with SIG2 and 3? Especially given SDK and so forth. So that has to be clearly articulated. That's AI number one. Second, AI vis-a-vis modeling. Here is what I suggest. There are lots of. I agree with everything that Wim, Tal, few others have spoken. What we should do. Let's first to the point that Tal was making. Let's document where we are. Let's at least have that alignment in terms of starting point. We can then figure out, does it belong really to working group one, which I think it should, but let's cross that bridge once we have the documentation of the current state. To the point that Tal you're making in terms of working group one, it's not that we're trying to, it's not that all of architecture belongs to working group one. Think of it this way: it's a smaller group to really make progress and streamline the discussions in a way and then bring it back to SIG1, which is also the intent of other working groups. But especially for working group when if we try to, in my opinion, if we try to have all of the architecture discussions right with this kind of a broad forum, we may be slower in making progress, or we would not know where to start and coalesce. So having a smaller working group, especially with telcos helping shepherding it, would really benefit. That's the starting point. We'll see how the working group goes, and then we can fine tune the if we need to change anything, or if working group one is not really panning out. It's not to silo the discussions, just to be clear. We do want to bring important topics back to this forum. It's just a way to speed up and parallelize the work, and with the right with the right set of people in that working group one. So that's, but back to work, the modeling topic, I would request Tal and Bernard and others to document the current state. We will then review, will then make a choice, and if needed, we'll discuss on which working group should be owning, starting to own the modeling. It may be more than one working group that may end up owning different parts, and what the relationship with SIG 2 and 3 is, to the point that Wim you are making. And I'll discuss these with Sana as well, given she was not here. Anything else that we missed in terms of action items on this topic? Okay, I assume silence implies we are good.
Yeah, I think we covered it.
Yeah, so we are at time though, unfortunately. Maybe one request that I have for the working group owners moving forward is please update the sorry, somebody's phone is ringing, I guess. Please do update the meeting notes with your updates before the meeting. It would be great if you could even do it like a few hours before the meeting, so people can review and may come up with more specific questions. I think in general, uh, again, a lot of it also falls on us, the chairs, but we need a little bit more discipline in creating the agenda, sharing the material beforehand, before the meeting starts, so that people can come in a little bit more prepared and we can have a more productive constructive set of discussions. So I will start to poke each of you in the Slack channel to add your updates for working groups. but let's be, let's be a little bit more disciplined through this. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the time that you spent. Please do again a reminder, update the working group specific documents with the key topics and action items for the Dev Summit, and then please do review Syed's slide deck, and let's have a more focused discussion next time around.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Good one.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye bye.